inside the Sixers. We'll take a closer look at this Sixers team. Big win last night. They beat the Jazz, the number one team in the West. So the number one team in the East beats the number one team in the West. But either one of them, the favorites at the midway point. Kevin Kinkead covers the 76ers and more for CrossingBroad.com. He's also a fine West Virginia University alum, which puts him in a very high classification among guests of this program. And he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, as that was quite the performance from one Joel Embiid last night. Maybe kind of a put you on the map type of performance, would you say?
Well, I think when you drop 40 and 19 on the reigning defensive player of the year, I think it would probably erase any kind of question marks you have about, dodging any matchups or anything like that. That was kind of an all-time press conference from him after the game, wasn't it?
Yes. He was very entertaining in the press conference last night. For someone to say that he's the best player in the league right now, is that going overboard? Is that just sensationalizing because we watch him and see him all the time? Or do we legitimately say, like, if you were starting a team, I would take Joel Embiid because he's the best?
There's certainly, the local version of recency bias. We see him all the time, so we're biased to say that. Of course, there's some homerism when it comes to it. I just think, Mike, it's fascinating that he's doing what he's doing in this era of the NBA when it's a guard-dominated league and you're jacking up three-pointers and it's perimeter shooting, pick-and-roll game and stuff like that. The fact that you've got a 7-footer who ties the game in regulation on a step-back three-pointer on a broken play, he's shaking and baking Rudy Gobert, making him look like he's nobody. When you consider kind of what the league is now and what Joel Embiid is doing at his height and his weight, it's hard to say that the athletic things that he's pulling off are not at the highest level that would make him the best player in the league. Like, it's apples and oranges if you're going to compare him to somebody like, Steph Curry of 3 years ago. But when you consider what the NBA is now, how can you not be impressed with what you're watching?
Yeah, I literally was just thinking, I said, I can't think of it. Like, it's like if LeBron James was 7 feet tall. Like, that's essentially all I can come up with is if LeBron James was 7 foot tall, he would be what Joel Embiid is doing right now, being able to put the ball on the floor, score in the paint, shoot a three. Doesn't mean he's a great three-point shooter, although he's 41%, but it's the skill that he's showing as if like LeBron James was 7 foot.
No, it's exactly what it is. And, anybody who's played sports at any level is quite capable of knowing like what a person should be able to do and should not be able to do. And everything that Joel is doing at his size and his weight and his athletic build is, goes against what we have traditionally believed that athletes like him are capable of doing. They're running, Mike, these actions where they're not even really actions. You can call it a delay action if you want. They basically just throw the ball to Joel Embiid on the perimeter and say, do your thing, which is insane to think about because, you and I talked about this like over the last year or two, probably of my appearances on this show, the idea of the Sixers not really having a closer or like a perimeter creator. But you're not just going to throw the ball to a guy like a Damian Lillard and let him create on the perimeter. Well, in the last couple of games, that's exactly what they're doing with Joel Embiid. It's insane to think about. You get back to the Cleveland game from Saturday night where he had the final look in regulation. They just threw him the ball at the three-point line and they ran ISO. They ran ISO with the 7-foot, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But the fact is he's added that he's now able to get to his spots from higher starting points. You don't just have to throw him the ball in the paint. So the fact that he's added all of this stuff to his game and he's playing like a guard at 7 feet is insane. And I think people can't take that for granted and just need to take a step back and say, this is something that's really special that we're watching right now.
And not only that, Kevin Kinkead, Crossing Broad, covers the Sixers. He's 26 with very little background. I can't imagine what he's going to be like 2 years from now.
No, I know. He's just entering his prime. That's the crazy thing to think about. And, not just the scoring, not just the rebounding, but the way he looks at the game. He made a comment the other night where he felt like the game was slowing down for him. And when you look at his, per 36 turnover numbers, they are like 0.01 away from being a career low. He's got that turnover number down. The way that he's passing out of double teams and seeing the floor, this is stuff that plagued him over the years. And, I think the fascinating thing about Joel, and I don't really have any way to quantify this or put data behind it, but I mean, you know as well as I do, Mike, that he was always kind of an emotional roller coaster guy who seemed to feed off the fans and sort of play up with the crowd and down with the crowd, up the competition and down the competition. And that's totally gone away because the fans ain't there.
Yeah.
So he's doing all this stuff sort of in an automatic, like isolated, like vacuum of a situation. And I think that's the most fascinating thing about it.
Okay. Who's more important to the ceiling and how far this team can go, Kevin? Ben Simmons or Tobias Harris?
Tobias Harris, because they need his scoring to stay consistent. You know, they've proven that they can win with Ben the way that he plays every night. And I don't think the jump shot is going to be a thing. Look, if you're closing through Embiid and Harris and you're okay with just sticking Ben in the dunker spot and he doesn't have to be a player down the stretch and he can just defend, then that's okay. If you remember the final possessions that they had in regulation last night, Wednesday night, Joel Embiid took a three-pointer, and then on 5 straight possessions, they just went straight at Gobert. Embiid had 3 of them, and then Tobias Harris had the next one. And then in overtime, Tobias scored 11 of their points. So if they have another legitimate scoring option in Tobias, if he's the 1B and Embiid's the 1A, they don't need Ben Simmons to do any of the things that we've been yelling for him to do over the last 3 years.
Which is something that I've been saying for a while now is I've come at peace with Ben doesn't need to score 20, 25, 18. If he scores 11 and this guy has 25, then okay, that's it. That's what it is. He contributed a lot to those 25 points a lot. So what – I guess, like, what are we seeing from Simmons now? Like, has he evolved his game? Because some people say, well, his game's still the same. Is it the same? Is he different in this offense than he was in Brett's offense? Like, when you watch Ben Simmons, are you seeing a different player or just a older version of the young kid that we saw the first couple of years?
Just an older version of the same guy who's kind of fine-tuned the things that he was already good at. You know, now he's hitting that little hook shot with regularity. He always took that little like garbage little 5-footer in the paint, but now it looks a lot better. You know, he's even a better defender than he was now. When he's driving and kicking, he's less out of control when he runs into that 2-man wall at the top of the foul line. So I think our frustration with him is not that there's no growth; it's that the growth is in marginal areas that he was already good at. When we're like, okay, when are you going to shoot the ball? You know, but I mean, maybe we just got to level with ourselves and say that's not coming, you know, because his floor is really damn good.
Yeah.
You know, it's our frustrations that we think he's been the same player that he's been from day one.
Well,
but the player from day one was a really good player.
It's like, Kevin, to get the best out of Ben, you need to have better complementary pieces. That's the way you get the best out of him. If you're expecting more from him personally, hey, you got to score more, you got to do more, you're going to be disappointed. But to get the best version of Ben is to get better people around him. And like I said before, like Seth Curry is an average player that's turned into a good player because he's playing it. Like if you take Ben off the team, Seth Curry's not helping you all that much.
No, and look, I know people are frustrated with the drive, you know, jump in the air, spin around, and throw the ball back out to the perimeter. But if Seth Curry and Danny Green hit 5 of 8 of those sequences, then that's worth 15 points right there. So, you know, again, like people can say that they're frustrated with the way that Ben plays, but there's a lot of truth to a quote that Elton Brand said from 2 years ago where he said, you know, Ben's not necessarily looking to shoot jump shots. He's looking to make the highest percentage play. And the fact of the matter is that sometimes the highest percentage play is collapsing 2 people in the paint, jumping in the air, doing a 360, and throwing the ball out to the corner for the 44% three-point shooter. So I know it's annoying to watch, but like the reality of it is that like, that's not a bad play.
And that to me, I don't think people appreciate how good he is at, and I don't know why teams do it. Why do the teams send another guy to him if you know he doesn't want to shoot? Because he almost baits you into it. He's so patient down there sometimes where he'll go down in the paint and then he turns his back as if like, oh gosh, I'm trapped. And it's almost like, come on, because the second you take that step towards me, I'm going to fire that pass and find that guy. And now he has guys that can hit that shot where he didn't before.
And they've both added it. He's doing better at that. Joel has now added that to his game as well. Like you're going to throw that dig. For listeners who don't know what I'm talking about, like a dig is like you kind of show a double. You go towards the guy, then you come back, then you go towards the guy and you come back. So you try to bait him, right? So that's what a dig is. You throw those digs, those doubles or whatever. Like Joel and Ben have become elite at recognizing that. And then now that you have shooters around him, you can punish him.
Yeah.
You didn't used to be able to do it. You couldn't do that last year. So it was drive and kick, and then it was Al Horford standing there in the corner. So, it just didn't work for what they had last year, which was why Daryl Morey, with limited resources, just tried to rebuild the 2017 squad.
So Daryl Morey's a big factor now. In your opinion, if he's on the phone at the All-Star break, what is his first, replacement that he needs here? What does he have to get?
I mean, I just think you need another bench piece, another consistent bench scorer, because they just have not. Look, when you get to the playoffs, your rotation in crunch time in the second round, it's only going to be 7 guys. Okay, so who are they bringing off the bench in Toronto? James Ennis and Greg Monroe for like 4 minutes, right? So if they get consistency out of Shake Milton, that's great, but they need – that one more guy off the bench. I think the starting lineup's good enough to beat anybody. Honestly, like I would not do the Kyle Lowry trade. Not for what these ridiculous prices that people are talking about. Like, am I insane here? 34-year-old guy on an expiring contract, and we're talking about throwing in a Thibault or Maxey and a first-round pick. Like, holy crap! There's no way that I would ever do something like that.
Well, and Thibault, to me, like if you're matched up with Brooklyn, he is a difference maker possibly in that particular series. I don't want to try to outgun Brooklyn. I want to try to stop them. Thibault helps me stop them. Adding Lowry makes me want to have to outgun them.
Even with Matisse Thybulle on the floor against Brooklyn, you're still going to score a ton of points on that team because they got nothing defensively. So it's like, you got Ben Simmons on Harden. We'll put like Matisse Thybulle, or Matisse. The three guys there would be put Danny Green on one of them, put Matisse Thybulle on one of them, put Ben Simmons on the other one, and then put 7-foot Joel Embiid behind them. I think they're fine.
Yeah.
I honestly think they're fine because even if you win that game 145 to 135, that's expected because I mean they've got 3 of the best scorers of all time. There's no shame in playing that kind of game.
And the big difference, like if you look at those Warriors teams, they scored a lot of points, but they had Clay and Draymond. They had defensive players. The Nets don't have that. Like, so they are going to have to win 145, 138. Where the Warriors could score in those great years that they had, Kevin, they had guys who could get you stops. Klay Thompson's one of the best perimeter defenders in the league. Draymond Green's tremendous. The Nets don't have that. So if I'm the Sixers, I don't know. Like, I know a lot of people, like Morey had Ariza. He's a buyout guy. I wouldn't be surprised if you make a call and say, hey, let me just get another defensive guy. It's like let's just stock up.
You get J.J. Redick on a buyout, too. I mean, there's other options there. I don't think they got to go crazy. I don't think – it's funny because, like, people were telling me that Tyrese Maxey was untouchable in a James Harden trade. But then they're saying, like, I'm hearing, like, multiple first-round picks for Kyle Lowry. I'm like, look, if you're saying that the stakes in a Harden trade and a Kyle Lowry trade are the same, I must be living in Seinfeld's bizarro world here because that would be the most, like, ridiculous thing of all time. But allow me to answer a question with a question. If I'm giving you the Eastern Conference right now and you're the 76ers, who legitimately are you afraid of right now?
Well, I mean, I guess if Anthony Davis is back, I'm not saying I'm afraid, but that would probably be
in the Eastern Conference. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
The Eastern
I
Conference
thought you were saying I'm giving you the East, meaning you've won the East. Then who?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, Milwaukee's been tough because they haven't been together all that much. And by the way, so who knows? Milwaukee's had this reputation of taking the regular season almost too seriously. Have they dialed that back a little bit? I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. And, I think that they're hard to evaluate because Giannis has had a couple less than stellar postseasons. So are we just taking that for granted? Are we just assuming that they're going to fold again in the playoffs? I don't know. Remember, I think everybody forgets it. Like, the Sixers built a team last year that was supposed to compete with the Bucks, and that matchup never happened anyway.
Right, exactly.
So, but I still feel comfortable with the combination of Joel Embiid and Dwight Howard being able to do enough to slow down Giannis if they got him in a playoff series.
Yeah, and Giannis, look, I'm not a hater of Giannis. I just feel like that lack of shot and him being the guy holds them back. And I don't think they have enough around him to pick up the fact that he is just not a great shooter, but he's the main shooter for that team. Like, Ben's not a great shooter, but he's got other guys around him that they don't need him to be the shooter. The Bucks need Giannis to score and be the shooter. The Sixers don't need Ben to be the scorer and the shooter. That's the difference.
The biggest issue, and you and I have talked about this probably 100 times over the last 3 years, is that it's not about any other team. It's about the Sixers themselves. And how many times did we say last year, they just got to get into the playoffs with everybody healthy. They got to load manage Embiid to get there healthy. How many games did the starting lineup play together last year? Like halfway through the season, they played like 9 games together or something like that. So honestly, if you're asking me straight up, if you can deliver a healthy starting lineup, as it looks right now to the playoffs, I would take the Sixers over anybody. The question is just, they're going to play 36 games in 67 days or something like that.
Yeah.
So people just got to get ready for Embiid to start sitting a little bit because it's going to happen. Don't be disappointed. It's just going to have to happen.
And they got a brutal stretch in there, and the Nets are on their tails, and the Nets have not played all that much together. So it will be interesting to see. Kevin Kinkead crossing broad. Sixers at the break, first place in the East. They will be back on Thursday night against the Bulls to start the second half, and you can hear that game right here on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Kevin, good to see you, man.
Anytime, Mike. You are a great Mountaineer.
Thank you. You too. Kevin Kinkead crossing broad, and he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.